The Assassin's Creed series began with the release of the first game, Assassin's Creed, back in 2007. Its sequel, Assassin's Creed 2, released 2 years later and introduced the character of Ezio Auditore di Firenze, a character that subsequently featured in the 2 follow-up games, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood and Assassin's Creed Revelations. It's these 3 games that make up the Ezio Collection, which first released for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One in 2016 and is now available on the Nintendo Switch. Is this collection a creed worth following, or does it put the ass in assassin? I'm Glen Bolger, thank you to Ubisoft for the review code, and now let's find out.
The assassins who guard it.
Now before we start the review, I need to let you know that the review code for the Ezio Collection did not unlock Brotherhood or Revelations until after launch, meaning that this review is based on Assassin's Creed 2. Now gameplay wise, all 3 games are very similar, bar a couple of inclusions such as the assassin recruitment system in Brotherhood, but we won't be able to discuss performance of those 2 games here. We will discuss performance of 2, and there will be another video at a later date to focus on the performance of the other 2 games, so look out for that if you are still on the fence about purchasing. In terms of story then, well, all 3 games follow the life of Ezio Auditore di Firenze through the 15th and 16th century, but they also follow his descendant Desmond Miles. It tells the tale of a centuries-old battle for supremacy between 2 factions, the Assassins and the Templars, and a quest to find the artifacts that will help win the war. Through the use of a machine called the Animus, Desmond can relive the life and memories of his ancestor and hopefully find the locations of these artifacts. What the games do well is take real life events and people and weave them into their fictional story, seeing Leonardo da Vinci effectively become to Ezio what Q is to James Bond, for example. The switch from modern to past can become quite convoluted, but on the whole it is an ambitious and quite exciting story, and this collection actually includes 2 short films, Lineage and Embers, that flesh out the timeline further still. So in terms of gameplay, I won't spend a huge amount of time on this owing to the age of the games, but all 3 are open world action games with a heavy emphasis on stealth. As anyone that has played an Assassin's Creed game before knows, you will make your way through the open world, locating both story and side missions, such as courier missions or races, and you will need to open up more of the map and therefore the world by climbing to the top of particular viewpoints in each district to synchronise the surrounding areas and make them accessible. This leads into the movement of Ezio, which is very much parkour based, and free running, as the game calls it, is achieved by holding down ZR and B at the same time. This allows Ezio to grab onto buildings in order to scale them, using ledges, frames, eaves or loose bricks to make fast work of climbing them. It will also see you leap from rooftop to rooftop, again using chimney tops, flagpoles or bunting to keep moving, making traversal of each city a fluid and quite exhilarating experience. It will be essential to do this at times in order to escape from guards or enemies, although this will in turn alert them to your presence and send their attention to your direction. The alternative is of course to be more passive in your approach to navigating environments, lurking in the shadows, staying within crowds and creeping out of eyesight, thus avoiding the attention of guards, negating the need for things to get quite so hectic. If you are seen, you will need to escape and lose your wanted level, shown by the colour of the search area on your map, and you do this by hiding or leaving the viewing areas of your assailants. Your objectives or memories are marked out on your map, and whilst these start out with you running errands for the family, soon they will become much more dangerous as you are dragged into the murky world below the surface. At this point, they will generally involve trailing someone with the intention of assassinating them, sometimes needing to enter a heavily guarded building to do so, and stealth is very much the name of the game here, and the stealth mechanics actually hold up very well still to this day. There are a number of options at your disposal, and it feels satisfying to hire a group of courtesans to distract guards or throw coins to cause a scene to get by without being spotted. Combat will be inevitable at times, and your notoriety will determine whether guards will actively seek you out as soon as they notice you. Insta-kills are an option if you stay undetected, but otherwise you will become embroiled in a fight. Personally, I never found the combat in the early Assassin's Creed games quite as fluid as it was in some of its contemporaries, Arkham Asylum for example, but it can definitely feel quite satisfying once you begin to get into a rhythm and learn to time your attacks well. Looking at controls in general then, and on the whole they have held up quite well. I hadn't played Assassin's Creed 2 since getting a 1000 gamer score out of it on the Xbox 360 many years ago now, and I wondered how the free running would feel these days. It does feel slightly stilted now, with it almost locking you into running in a straight line, which defies the fluidity the situation calls for and promotes, but it does start to become second nature. You'll begin to know when to move around a building as your route to the top dries up, and how to gauge jumps properly in order to keep yourself up high, but there will be times when you fall from great heights or begin to climb a wall when it was not your intention. Also included in this version are touch controls. These allow you to navigate the menus by touch, moving through the various options or reading through the files. It's nice to have whilst playing in handheld mode, but it doesn't really offer any sort of real advantage over using the buttons. Gameplay is tight and it does hold up well. I mean, it was the basis for this series for many entries after all. Things can become a little repetitive, but the vast world at your disposal and the joy that exploring it brings definitely alleviates this, and it scores 16 out of 20. Controls do feel slightly clunky these days, but once you get into the free running, it still feels incredibly exhilarating and it helps to break up the gameplay. They score 15 out of 20. When it comes to the visuals, it's safe to say that time has definitely caught up with these games in some respects, but it does hold up in the area that matters the most for such an experience. Character models most certainly show their age these days, with faces looking quite bulbous and eyes that appear to stare anywhere but at their intended target, but thankfully the world built is the start of each game and they continue to be pretty awe-inspiring in terms of both their layout and construction. From across Italy in Assassin's Creed 2, to Rome specifically in Brotherhood, and then to Constantinople in Revelations, they are quite simply what makes the games for me. The painstaking recreations of historical buildings and cities are a joy to behold, and the free running mechanic, whilst a little clunky these days as I've already said, just allows you to fully appreciate every square inch. I love the orange hue of early morning Florence as you leap elegantly across the rooftops, and while in terms of being a remaster this is in all honesty a fairly lackluster affair, these locations still manage to keep their allure. Performance wise, Assassin's Creed 2 runs at 30 frames per second, as was the case with the release of this collection elsewhere in 2016, and I didn't experience any slowdown during my playtime. Some pop-in and the late loading of some assets and textures does break the immersion, but I do truly feel that despite all this, the setting is so much more than the sum of its parts. In terms of the audio, this actually plays a big part in complementing the living world each game builds and lessens the impact of the badly aged character models through voice acting that adds a huge amount of charm. The decision to have characters speak in their native tongue, albeit sparingly as they drift between Italian and English in Assassin's Creed 2 for example, was an inspired one. It helps to authenticate the experience and adds a huge amount to the world building. Not all of the voice acting is as strong, but on the whole it has held up well. The same can be said for the score, which adds to the exhilaration and verticality of exploring the city. Visuals have certainly aged, and as a remaster this is found a little wanting, but the cities really do hold up well and they set the scene wonderfully. They score 15 out of 20. Audio does a great job of continuing to build the world, adding a charm and authenticity to a heavily story-driven game. It gets 18 out of 20. Assassin's Creed the Ezio Collection costs £44.99 and regional equivalents are on your screen now. Now, there are two ways to look at this. £45 for 3 games, each which would take you around 15 to 20 hours to finish, and that's if you go pretty much from point A to point B without bothering with side quests or collectibles, plus those 2 short films being included and all of the original DLC is good value, especially if you haven't played any of it before. But then Assassin's Creed 2 is almost 15 years old now, and the Ezio Collection itself is now 6 years old based on when it released on other systems. Plus, as I said, as remasters they are quite lackluster, and whilst I cannot confirm this owing to the reason stated at the start of the review, I have heard that the multiplayer aspects of the later 2 games have been removed here. I do also feel compelled to mention the fact that the physical collection only includes 1 game on the cartridge and needs Brotherhood and Revelations to be downloaded. It's a practice that really needs to disappear, although let's be honest, it's only going to become more prominent, but when the whole package is only 7.4GB, why is this not all on the cart? That being said, if you can look past this annoyance regarding the physical version, it can be had for around £32 on some websites, which is a much better deal. Ubisoft games also go on sale quite regularly on the eShop, which is something to bear in mind, but overall, value gets 13 out of 20. To conclude, provided Brotherhood and Revelations perform as well as 2, then this collection contains 3 very solid entries in the long running series. I really enjoyed replaying it for the first time in a long time and loved how, whilst the graphics do look dated these days, the city still feels alive and is a huge amount of fun to navigate. As remasters they aren't hugely impressive, feeling more like straight ports to be perfectly honest, and this makes that high price harder to swallow, although in terms of hours of playtime and content included, it will definitely keep you busy for quite a while. If you have played them before or you prefer the mechanics to the newer games, then it's a harder sell, but that doesn't take away from the fact that gameplay wise, this is still a creed worth following.
Keep the sword, Ezio.
Do I know you from somewhere?
Don't you recognize me? It's me, Mario!
Uncle Mario?
Assassin's Creed The Ezio Collection gets a SwitchUp score of 77%. Thank you everybody for watching, I hope you enjoyed that review. Please do remember to leave a like if you did. As I said, because 2 of the games didn't unlock via the code until after launch, we will do another video just confirming performance for the other games in this series, so if you're not quite sure, do keep a lookout for that video. A quick thank you to our Patreons as always for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.
Get down, now!
Next week's public mass with the Cardinal will have to be cancelled due to a small outbreak of plague. Pray for his recovery and the confinement of the dread death to the small, unimportant village he was in.
I suppose I have more pressing concerns.